Board of Education to order. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ansell?
Here.
Mrs. Duncan?
Here.
Mr. Gibson?
Here.
Mr. Morton?
Here.
Mr. Slow?
Here. Would you stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first order of business is the superintendent's report, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Caldwell.
Okay, thank you. Want to make sure that we posted in the chat of our YouTube live stream that if anybody has any questions that they would like addressed at the meeting, we will do that during the public participation portion. So we should have some coming in. I'm not sure. I do believe we are live.
Yeah, I see it.
I don't see it on my phone, so I just want to make sure you're seeing us. We're good? Okay. So, want to address some things that in the board report and out to you so that you're aware of some updates. In our auditorium, from a facility standpoint, the auditorium bleachers, you might recall we had the telescopic issue at the last board meeting. I said we had a technician from Farnham, who's the vendor that out of Columbus that services our equipment. They were in. I met with the technician when he was in the facility early last week. We talked about the possible solution. He said, we've always had, because when you get that bracket system completely extended, it's not so rigid that it stays perfectly straight. You get movement as it slacks. And the other thing the technician had said through his years, he knows that in the new facilities, just construction knowledge that floors do settle. And so we have two floor surfaces that the wheels of that telescopic device are catching. There's carpet, and then there's the ceramic tile in the cafeteria. And so he says, based on the fact that you get floor settling, you got two different surfaces, and you've got aging equipment that's now about 16 years old, he says when it grabs, and the wheels grab the carpet differently than they grab the tile, because of the different friction on the surfaces, wheels are going to move faster than others. He said, so you get a lot more movement than you would under the new system. His recommendation is to permanently moor in the foundation part that sits in the auditorium. And he said that'll more permanently lock down that base and create a greater rigidity as it starts its motion out. He believes that will redirect the system. The problem that we will run into, and it's not really a problem, but it's a little bit of an inconvenience, if you will, is when you permanently affix it to the floor, that foundational piece, it is going to set that wall out about 3 inches. That wall is already about a 3.5 to 4 inch wall based on the metal bracketing that panel represents. Because what you have is the telescopic system behind that wall, and then we put up a nice panel system and attached it to it. So when we looked at where the wall would come out, it is not going to be a nuisance in any way to traffic patterns. So it won't be flush, but it should create that rigidity, that fixed system that allows for an easier motion in and out. So we're going to move forward with that repair and pay for it out of our permanent improvement funds. It's about $5,500 for that. But at this point, we have really no functionality because we get inconsistent operation out of that system, and it takes a lot to get it back in. In fact, as you know, the last time we used it at the start of the year, we couldn't get it back in.
So you're going to be making like a track, so it's all the same level, so it's going to go.
That I can't answer to that specificity, but I mean, the way he described it to me is we have that base platform, and that will be locked into place because they'll permanently affix it to the floor, and then the rest of them, as you move up, are those seats, and those are what push out.
Yeah.
So we're going to get I think a more consistent start because that base is going to stay fixed, and it should provide better guidance. That's the way he explained it to me, and I hope I'm doing it justice. So
And we'll just take a little bit of space out of the cafeteria.
that about 3 inches. Yeah.
That's good information.
And we have two little wall sections that come out of the auditorium, and the other wall kind of butts up to it. Now it's just going to be a little bit further recessed, but it's got a nice finish on it. because it's a black metal bracket, which is like an end cap to that wall unit. And so it'll stick out a little bit, but it won't impact traffic in any way. So, okay, as far as Bascom is concerned, in terms of the update, we were waiting on we got the new locks in for the office system, but we didn't get the new cores. I should say this, we had the new handles, but we didn't have the new cores. The cores are the internal parts of the handles that can be switched out. They're interchangeable parts, and we can put a new core in and have a completely different master key or office key. So we had to special order those cores, and those arrived, I believe, late last week. Mr. Semeno was working with Mr. Maurer today to get those cores assigned in terms of which offices they went to, and we'll get those installed. We might have to change out one door handle in Bascom because we're not sure it's the right handle. We might be able to upgrade to a different handle. It's the main entrance once you buzz into the office, because on the inside we currently have one that has a lock knob, and you shouldn't have that. We think we can get a door handle that's always unlocked on the inside but locked on the outside. So that's something Mr. Cemento is looking into, but we're nearing practical completion of that. Once that's done, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Panic, we still have a final payment to pay out to Murphy, correct? We still have one small retainer?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And that'll be paid once we are completely done with that. As far as the Hall of Fame enclosure and the display, I don't know if you have seen that or you've been in that hallway prior to tonight's meeting, but that is now completed and it's been installed, it's operational. The TV operates on a timer. The display shuts down at, I think it's 10, turns on at 7, and soon we're going to prepare a press release for sometime here after Thanksgiving, early December, to announce the class of 2020 and to also, make people aware of our display, because right after that, we want to be able to upload the link to the web. And so I've made some phone calls here and there. I've got some, spare 10 minutes trying to reach out to people and get some additional photos from classes in prior years. And as we get them, we are uploading them and updating their bios and so forth, so that we can optimize that display and duly recognize all of our previous induction classes as well as the current one. So now that that's finalized, we want to roll that out to our community and our alumni. And naturally, it's dealing with the pandemic. You can't do what we had normally planned, not only for that, but this was to be one of our I guess you would call it marquee celebrations of our 50th anniversary, because as you know, this school year represents 50 years of LaBrae, and we've had to put so much on the back burner, if you will. But the Hall of Fame inductees, as we've spoken to them, we've kind of let them know that next year we definitely will be inviting them in for a physical ceremony where we recognize them at a winter basketball game. So, just what you have to do is you deal with the circumstances that are taking greater priority in our state and our nation. So as far as students are concerned, we are in our second week of remote learning at Bascom, and that will end this week, and we will return to a normal schedule on Monday and Tuesday. That's as of today. I will tell you that, in a side conversation that Mr. Sewell and I had last week, he had asked the question about, coming back on Monday. And I will tell the entire board what I shared with him, which is any day that we can, safely put kids in our classrooms with our teachers, we want to take advantage of. And after a 2-week remote period, even from an organizational standpoint, which these days are going to be more than organization, if we're able to continue forward with this plan, these are still going to be quality days with our students. So we anticipate, this 2-week period coming to a close and being able to resume our scarlet and gray calendar. Now, I want to remind you that the reason we closed Bascom was not due to staff cases. It was due to, student cases. It was due to staff cases. So that primarily because of a positive case and what we had to do with quarantine, we ended up not being in a position to be able to continue all of our operations. So as of right now, the student cases that we have, none of them are connected to one another. So that is a sign that our hybrid model, where you are having half the kids in attendance at a day, is allowing us to easily or more easily manage than if they were all here at once. Because when it comes to the contact tracing, that makes it a lot more manageable in identifying who may have been exposed. So I wanted to update you as to the numbers in terms of where they stand. So as of right now, we have 4 LaBrae students. This is since mid-September when we began tracking student and staff cases. So we have 4 LaBrae students in our classrooms who have tested positive. And then we have 1 ESC student at an ESC unit. Now, incidentally, that 1 ESC student happens to be a LaBrae residential student. So technically it is one of our students, but remember, some of the students in those ESC classrooms are not LaBrae students, they are ESC students. And I'll speak to more of that in just a second. Now, as far as staff cases, we've also had 4 staff cases, and one of them was also an ESC staff member. So in total, to date, we have 5 student cases in our facilities, and we have 5 staff cases. One point of clarification that I want to make about the ESC case is, by law, the reporting agency to the health department for ESC units is the ESC. So technically, when you have a LaBrae student in an ESC unit, or a ESC employed staff member who's teaching in a LaBrae building, the ESC will report those positive cases to the Department of Health. However, it's our responsibility to make sure, because it's occurring in our facilities, that we still carry out the notification process to all the parties that we're supposed to notify. So even though it's an ESC case and they will report it, and we don't report it because you'd get double counting, if you will. So we don't want to double count and inflate that number. So the ESC will report it to the health department, and we end up, in addition to what the ESC does, we also notify our families as well, as the ESC is notifying their families. So in a situation like that, when I go through the notification process, I will send out the appropriate emails, and then I let the parents in our buildings know more details. So I'll send the notification letter that says there was a positive case in the building, but in my email I will go a little bit further to let our parents know that, hey, in this building we had an ESC unit, this is an isolated case, this population does not circulate among the LaBrae students. So I kind of provide that little extra detail so that they, parents in the building know where the case was directly located, a little bit more about it. A similar situation through the middle school. We had a middle school student who tested positive, but based on the cohort, I can't remember the exact dates, but let's just say hadn't been in school since the previous Wednesday. It was a Wednesday. It started getting sick on a Saturday. The look-back period is 48 hours. When you go back 48 hours, it's Friday and Thursday. So the Wednesday is outside the window. And so in that particular email for our middle school parents, I made sure that, yes, you got the notification that LaBrae Middle School had a positive case, but in the body or the text of my email, I let our middle school parents know, especially the ones that were in the grade level, that this was a case that, I don't want to say there's no risk, but more minimal risk because of the timing of the days. So I try to explain in most clarity that I can that window, that 48-hour time frame, because in most cases those parents are going to want to know that piece of information. And I can do that in cases where those details you're able to share them, because it's not necessarily divulging information that we're not supposed to share. So, and in most cases, when we're able to offer those specifics, I think it's good to be able to give them to those building parents so that they're aware of exactly what level it might have impacted them. So, again, 5 cases of students, 5 cases of staff, and since I'm on the topic of notifications, and I see now we've got some questions in our chat about notifications, and I'll answer those if they're different and review them as we go through them at the public participation part. But I want to make you aware of the notification levels. So when we have a positive staff case or we have a positive student case, we are required to notify parents of students who may have been exposed. And that's where our seating charts, our bus seating charts all come into play. So, for example, when we had the ESC student, who's a LaBrae student, test positive, they're not in our classes. We make sure the entire building knows, all the parents in the building know that a case happened in that building, but we also make the parents aware that it's isolated, in all probability, it's isolated to the bus. And then we have a different level of notification for the parents on that bus. And we ended up quarantining a few students off of that bus within the 6 feet proximity. So we have a more specific notification that goes to the students who are most impacted by the case. And so if a student is in a class, is in a grade level, and there's potential for exposure, we actually send that letter out, and I think I've copied you on a few of them where you've seen where it say, your child may have been exposed. We've shared your contact information with the Department of Health, and we're going through the contact tracing process. And then the next level of notification is the same thing for our staff. If you've got a student or staff in a building who's positive, you are to notify the staff who may be exposed. And so we have that notification that goes as well. And then you have a similar notification, but not maybe as specific, to the entire building, because you have grade levels or classes that have no interaction with a student, and you send out a notification to all the parents in the building, whether it's LaBrae Middle School, LaBrae High School, Bascom, that we've had a positive case, and you're making them aware that there's a positive case in that building. And then the last layer of notification is a general notification to our community, which is required to be posted to our website or publicly. And that's what we post to our website. Every time we've had a positive case, we post the general notification letter to the website. So those are the steps in the notification process. Anybody have any questions on that?
What was the severity of our cases? I mean, is it high risk, or is it severely ill, or are they all back from their...
Well, I don't know that I could speak to that with great authority, so I would be hesitant to do that. I have spoken to a few parents who have had positive cases because I had to track down and I couldn't determine whether they rode the bus or not, so sometimes I've had to make those calls home. And I've heard, let me summarize it this way. The feedback that I've heard, including students and staff, is mild to severe.
Are they all back?
To my knowledge, yes. All of our staff have returned and have met the CDC guidelines and the health department guidelines to return and are considered recovered, and all of our students are out. Now, I will say that we do have, let me say this, we've had a great cooperation from our parents and our families, because we, from the outset, tried to tell them, look, don't send your kid to school if your child has any symptoms. And our parents are doing a great job of calling in, and they're holding their kids back, and they're communicating primarily, I think mostly with the secretaries and Mrs. Harper. And then Mrs. Harper will we have a spreadsheet that we're keeping track of, so the secretaries and the nurse and myself, we can go in and see situations that parents are self-reporting to us, so we can go back and follow up and monitor. So we're getting great cooperation in that regard. So, we've had some kids where parents have said, hey, I'm not sending them to school because they've got this going on, we're not quite sure. And then, or someone in the family's got similar conditions, so we're just kind of self-quarantining until we figure this out. Then that person in the family gets tested, and it comes back positive or it comes back negative. When it comes back negative, then they're okay to resume attendance so long as they have no illness symptoms. Then it's back to a normal illness. But we've heard feedback where it's been mild, and that includes students and staff, and we've heard feedback where it's taken days to feel normal again or back to recovery. I think it's difficult to put a boilerplate or a stereotype on what everybody can expect, because I guess what I'm seeing is that everybody's handling it differently who's got it, that I'm aware of. Any other questions on that front? Okay. And again, we'll get to the public comments. We'll review those or read those off aloud. And then if there's something that, we need to reiterate or address, we will do that. So we've had two, moving towards literacy professional development. We've had two literacy committee meetings. And this week, today we're going to ask you to ratify the adjustment to the calendar to put it in a record. But we've had to alter some days of attendance to accommodate some professional development as part of our literacy plan. One of the things we're trying to do is actually give all of our K-5 staff professional development in the science of reading, some of the science behind how the brain functions and how the young brain works as it learns to decode and become aware of the reading symbols and the phonics and things of that nature that are needed in order to become proficient readers. So the first day is November the 20th, and the next day that we will do this is December the 11th. And one of the reasons we picked these 2 days is because on our original calendar, Gray had 2 more days than Scarlet students. And because there were 2 more physical days of attendance, we tried to use those 2 before we took anything away from our Scarlet cohort. And this will obviously balance it up. But there will be remote lessons that engage all students on these days. And, so our teachers will be engaged in professional development on Friday the 20th and Friday, December 11th, and that's for all students K-5. Our building principals last week sent out information to our families. We also posted something to our social media so that our parents were reminded about this as well. Okay. And as far as winter sports, I know our athletic directors across the state are dealing with the Ohio High School Athletic Association guidelines on those winter sports. They're going to be very similar to our other guidelines for the indoor sports and volleyball that we went through. They have indicated that it is likely there will be cheerleader participation. I can't speak to a way, but I do know, at least from my knowledge, the home participation is there, and quite possibly the pep band. The Ohio High School Athletic Association just mandating that all safety protocols have to be followed. So if you can't follow those safety protocols, depending on your capacity and things like that, then you're going to have to, not allow that participation. So one of the conversations that we've had is, the JVs versus the varsity and our capacity of what we can handle in our gym. And so it's very likely that at the end of a JV game, our JV crowd who is there on the list, much like they came in the spring, will be required to leave to make room for the varsity crowd that comes in, because we do not have the capacity to be able to seat them all, at the same time. So those are adaptations that I know they're working through, and we'll be communicating to our basketball families at the middle school level and high school level as we get closer. I will say this, middle school is going to be a far greater challenge for us because, we don't have the gym capacity that we do at the high school level. So much smaller seating capacity there. Okay, as far as financial is concerned, naturally House Bill 305 and Senate Bill 376 are introduced. They're undergoing committee testimony. I shared those funding allocations with you. I just want to caution you, all Trumbull County schools do better under House Bill 305, but the numbers you saw in those allocations are if it was fully funded. And remember, the bill to ease the burden on any budgets or future budgets, the bill calls for a gradual 1/6 funding as we move through it. So we would phase, if it would pass, we would phase it in over 6 years. But naturally, this is the bill that takes a look at your capacity, your local capacity of not only property wealth, which ours is not, we rank 529th in the state in property wealth out of 610 school districts. Not only property wealth does it measure, but it takes IRS data and looks at median incomes. And so it'll look at an average of tax years, and in the formula it measures income as well as property wealth to determine a local school district's capacity. And then you get a capacity index, and based on the formula, that capacity index will help determine your level of funding. And if you look at that Trumbull County spreadsheet I shared with you, those with the lowest capacity get the most money. And so I don't know if that's evidence that it's a perfect formula, because I don't think that it's perfect, but it's evidence of their intent, which is what the court said, is that you can't rely on property wealth to fund schools. That is, in some ways, most ways, discriminatory to students who live in poorer zip codes. That's what the DeRolf case in 1997 was about. And that's what this law tries to address. So you've got an Ohio-born piece of legislation made by practitioners in the field that's a bipartisan effort with Democrats and Republicans in the state. And now it's lame duck time. And, you know, there's going to be a little bit of an urgency to see if we can get this passed through the legislature before the end of the year. So one of the things I would update you on is I will actually be in Columbus tomorrow, representing the Northeast region of Ohio for the Ohio School Boards Association and the Buckeye Association of School Administrators. And we have 132 superintendents and treasurers that have signed on to the testimony that I wrote in support of House Bill 305. We can't, much unlike the Ed Choice testimony, where droves of citizens and school leaders in the public sector and the private sector went to Columbus in February to testify, you can't coordinate and organize all of that. So we've identified people within the various regions of the state, Northwest, Central, Southwest, Southeast. 5 or 6 of us will be there as point people with other administrators from our region signed on, not necessarily supporting LaBrae, but supporting the concept of House Bill 305 and a funding model that is predictable, that's based on the concepts of what the court said, which is you're trying to close that equity gap and give those communities who don't have the means that level playing field, if you will. So please, across the state, to see hundreds of administrators in every region sign on to their regional testimony, and that will be delivered tomorrow before the House Finance Committee. The Senate Finance Committee is also, I believe, starting testimony tomorrow, but we'll be there in representation tomorrow on House Bill 305 in the House. And again, I will tell you that I think the House is got a greater level of support. There are some key instrumental Republicans in the Senate that have promised to hear the bill. They have not promised to move the bill. And so there's going to be a little more lifting, if you will, and convincing and educating out of the Senate to see if they are willing to move it forward. One key senator from the Chagrin area, Senator Dolan, was quoted last week as saying, "I don't know how you pass a school funding bill without funding it." And my response to that, and I will reach out to him in an email at some point, is that that's the beauty of scaling the formula. You have a funding method or a methodology. It doesn't mean you have to fund it 100%. You can scale it, and that's what that 1/6 proposal would do. You scale it in a sixth at a time, 1 year at a time, because we all understand Ohio's budget is a little bit taxed right now. And so we know you're not going to be able to fund it, even under pre-COVID times. It would have been a stretch to try to fund this fully. So we got some work to do from an education standpoint, and hopefully we'll get greater movement in the Senate to mirror what might happen in the House. But we'll keep you updated on that. But for those of you listening, if you haven't seen it in the paper, if this plan fully passed, was implemented right now, fully funded, LaBrae will get $1.9 million more a year to fund programs. And you know, that is important to sustaining operations. We all understand that. Okay, as far as personnel is concerned, you know, we recently held a meeting between Matthews and I. Mr. Panic, being the shared treasurer, was in on that meeting between the two superintendents. We had a Zoom session. We talked about how the shared arrangement is working. I've shared this with you before, just reiterating that we said we would follow that up with an individual meeting with our central office staff. So last week, Mr. Panic, myself, Mr. Panic's secretary, Ms. Best, and then our assistant to the treasurer, Mrs. Diorio, we all sat down, probably met for over an hour, and we talked about two broad principles. How are we communicating, and what does our workflow look like? So are there improvements in communication we need to make, because that's going to impact everybody's ability to do their job. And then let's talk about the division of labor and responsibility. What are you doing differently? What is troublesome? What's problematic? What are you having a hard time learning? I thought we had some good conversation in that hour 15-minute session. And what Matthews and LaBrae has agreed to do is to put both districts' feedback into one document and then share that document to every board member, so all board members for both districts are seeing that response. So I'm getting ready to write that narrative up to summarize our meeting. Matthews will do the same, and then when we've got that document completed, hopefully, right after Thanksgiving will be a kind of a temporary or tentative goal, if you will, and then we'll push that out to you guys so that you have some idea of what that looks like, and then you can feel free to ask individual questions or reach out to, we'll make sure that boards have directory information as well. I think every year we share directory information across the county of board members. We'll make sure you have that again, and if you want to talk individually with the Matthews members, you can. You can ask questions of Mr. Panic, who's at the heart of it. So to summarize it, we've had some bumps, some growing pains, but it's all been around learning to work differently, working with different personalities, communicating differently. So we got some good, honest conversations in our office, and we'll share that out with you at some point soon moving forward. And then last but not least, just a couple miscellaneous things. Don't forget about the strategic plan. We kind of take another look at that. I know Mr. Sewell made some edits to the plan, or suggested edits about looking at our, pandemic response and the delivery of services. If you've got anything in there you want to bring forth for a discussion, we can do that. Maybe the next meeting in December, we can set out an opportunity to have some discussion items about that. And then we have a board meeting December 14th. Okay?
Any questions for the superintendent at this time? Okay, we'll move into public participation. Want to read anything we received?
Sure. So the first question comes from an April McMillan. If there's several questions. Why is there no notification sent to all parents when a positive case is in grades 3 to 12? The kids in those grades are in one building with many shared areas and shared busing. So the answer to that question is, while it is one building, the shared areas are sanitized. There's one shared area that is common, is the cafeteria, and that's sanitized after every lunch period. I don't know that those are as shared as commonly as some may be perceived. Traffic does not flow as well as or as easy. But I would say that, I guess the question might look at why aren't we notifying all parents? We do not send out, I would acknowledge that, we do not send out a notification to the building where it does not happen. That might be something that we would have to reconsider. I would say this, one of our thought processes, and I guess the idea would be, and we've had some conversations about this, is do you run the risk of over notifying to a degree that you're causing panic among a population that maybe is remotely even related or not related at all? I had some parents reach out to me that were not happy that we notified the high school students and parents that we shut down Bascom in remote, saying this does not impact us. Why are you doing this? So, I will say this, you're going to get it from both sides. I will say the idea of the shared spaces, as I read that question and I reflect on it, there might be some value in at least sending out that notification. But I think the general premise has been to follow the guidelines, and if someone needs to be notified because they really had a risk of exposure, that they would be notified. I can't say that that's what we're doing is correct. I can't say that what we're doing is wrong. I can only say that, we've just been following the guidelines, and at this point, we've been blessed that we've been able to keep our students' distance, and we've been able to sanitize appropriately by the fact that no student cases are connected to one another. So among those 5, we are not seeing students spread it to one another. And the health department reiterates that every week. And I don't know if I emailed you guys a copy of this letter or not, or you saw it as we posted it to our social media, but the health department went so far as to write a letter to try to encourage adults in our communities across the county. This was not directed at any one particular community, but all adults, to say with, it's the adult behavior that is spreading it to kids. And when we've had adults get it, we've been able to keep them quarantined and have properly notified them. So we'll have to give some more reflection to that. Now, I will say, on this front, one of the things that I've been thinking about, because last week I sent out to everybody in our families a link to Ohio's Trumbull County list. Because one of the things that I've been thinking about is how do we create our own tracker, if you will. Because you got the Ohio School COVID tracker, or how can we create our own tracking system? So, I'm looking at a spreadsheet that we might, much like we share our transportation, I'm looking at how we might format a spreadsheet that when we log weekly our case counts, we would put those case counts in that spreadsheet, and it would be shared out so that parents could then see it. It would be linked to our website. So, we want to make sure that, parents have access to information. That was the intent behind sharing the COVID link from the Ohio Health Department. But there's probably some things we could do better that we're thinking about. And we'll be moving in that direction. Hopefully by the end of this week we'll have something along those lines. And we'll have to give some further thought to Ms. McMillan's question about building levels. But anyone that has questions about our sanitation practices and has questions about shared spaces, we'll gladly address those if you give our offices a call. I don't believe, though, that our students are sharing spaces as widely as it might be perceived from one building to the next, okay? The common space, again, is the cafeteria, and that is being sanitized and hand wiped down between every lunch period. We even made adjustments after the first week to our lunch periods in the middle school so that we could buy more time between lunch at the high school to middle school to intermediate, so that we're using bleach solutions to wipe those eating spaces down. So, and again, evidence that that's working is the idea that our students are not spreading it to one another. And when you do the contact tracing, it's not coming from within the school. So, the other question says, why aren't you notifying of the grade level and actual number of positive cases each notification is being posted for? That might be something we resolve as we try to find a way to format a spreadsheet that we share specifically, and that would be public information by building, but it wouldn't be necessarily by grade level. It would just identify whether or not we've had them in a particular building. And it would identify whether or not it's been a staff case or whether or not it's been a student case. The next question Mrs. McMillan writes is, almost every school surrounding us is going full remote until 12/1, at least because of the increased cases. Why are our kids still in session with the amount of notifications that have been posted? That's a very fair and valid question. I would not believe that almost all of us surrounding us, or I guess if you look at surrounding us, I believe some are still in session. Some buildings are remote, like at Champion High School, but Champion Elementary and Middle School is still in session. Champion, as you know, if you paid attention to the news, had to go remote because of what happened in an after-school activity at a dance that was sponsored by parents. So they went remote at the high school to stop the spread, yet they are still in session at the middle school and the elementary. I think we've done something similar in that when we had a staff issue, we reacted promptly by shutting Bascom down from in-person attendance, and we went to remote learning because we needed to ensure that that didn't spread. And all indications are at this point that we're not seeing any new cases come out of that. We know that that still could pop up within this week, so we're monitoring that, but for the most part, we think that might have been effective. So some schools are doing that. They're going, I know Newton Falls just announced yesterday, because of staffing issues, they're going remote. And then, of course, other schools are considering, I think TCTC did that, but I can tell you, I know firsthand, TCTC is not 100% at 6 feet distance. And when you have classrooms that are tighter than 6 foot of distance, you're going to be quarantining. And when you have to do that, and it's hard to contact trace a multitude of students, it's going to cause you to do remote. One of the things that our principals are adamant with our teachers about is constantly reminding them, keep your distance, keep masking. And that's what helps, is the two best barriers for protection. And when we're practicing that with fidelity and we're practicing our cohorts, I'll go back to again, we are not seeing student to student spread, and we have not seen staff to student spread or student to staff spread. Contact tracing is showing this is happening after school. So if we catch this stuff and quarantine people who might be around positive cases, who are considered a contact, we, so far, knock on wood, we know this is not foolproof, we think we've been able to mitigate how rapidly this spreads among our population. So I prefer, and I don't know what the board's request is, if the Board of Education feels that other people around us are going remote and we should also be going remote, then we need to hear that. But at this point, I think the general consensus is let's react to where we need to react, and let's try to keep our operations moving. While I respect parents that ask that question, we have a number of parents that say, I want to keep my children in school. And so if we are doing it safely, we want to keep doing that safely, and we will respond with safety at the forefront like we did at Bascom when necessary. So, I know there's a lot of conversation. We have a health department meeting on Wednesday with the commissioner. This is a weekly meeting. And I know that superintendents right now, when we talk about going remote learning, the number one concern has not been whether or not students are spreading the virus. The number one concern has been, can we staff our classrooms? Because when adults across the county are getting it, districts are having a hard time covering it. Covering those absences, covering custodians, covering bus drivers. I got one district, the superintendent emailed me today, his concern was, I don't know how our transportation is going to flesh out if we happen to have a couple positive cases in that area. So that's been the biggest concern about whether or not districts can continue operations. It's not about the safety of what we're doing during the day. It's about, can we maintain operations? Can we cover staff? Because most of us are seeing more adult issues than we are student issues. So whatever feedback you have on that front, we'll gladly get to. Okay. All right. So I think I've covered all of the questions that Mrs. McMillan put forth. So if the Board of Education has any members want to give feedback to that topic, by all means, provide some input, some guidance, things along those lines.
And personally, as long as we stay safe, keep the kids and staff safe, I would like to keep them in school as long as possible. If the parents are uncomfortable, they can always pull them out and do remote if they wish. I'd rather see them in class as long as we can do it. If we have cases, we may have to change it. Like everybody around us, we're not operating like everybody else. We still have to follow the safety guidelines presented by the health department. So in that regard, we all are doing that. But inside, that's up to us to decide. I think for our district, we want to keep the kids in as much as possible. So as long as we can keep them safe, keep our staff safe, we're going to try to do the best we can. And go, the hybrid seems to be working so far, and we'll do it if we have an outbreak. And I know that something's going to be coming because flu season's coming. It's going to be hard to differentiate between the two, so we'll just have to adjust as we run into the issues. I'd rather keep them going as much as we can.
What we're doing now seems like it's working, the hybrid method, and the details that Paul went into, seems like they've got all the details of it as tight a grasp on as possible. Who knows what could happen, but up to this point, I think we've done a really good job. This is indicated.
I agree with you, Tim. I agree, Leslie. I hate to see us go to remote. these kids need to be here, and we need to have them here. And as long as we continue in the direction we're going, we need to just maintain it.
I agree, the evidence supports it, we're doing it safely right now.
One of the things that I would just encourage, you know, and this is kind of on the same topic, but a little bit different. I know there's, you know, conversation in our community, you know, back in August and September about being here all day, every day, and kids should be back in school. And we all get that on a personal level. But there is a school district in the county that recently chose to go more all day for most days of the week. And now that school is going more remote. And it makes you wonder, what impact do you get when you start bringing in kids and you're putting 15, 25 kids in a classroom without keeping it 6 foot of distance? And I share that with you only because I understand the community pressures you, or they pressure us, and they say, you know, we should be here every day. But that's one of the reasons why we aren't. We're trying to stick to this hybrid model until we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, so that we can, when we do have cases, we can contact trace. I can tell you right now, the health department is swamped. We cannot rely on them to do the contact tracing for us. In fact, when we went remote in Bascom, luckily we were able to do our contact tracing on our own, had some conversations with the health department to say, is there anything we're missing? Are we doing this right? Yes, you're good. Because they had pretty much said that by law, these testing centers are supposed to have it in the system within 24 hours. That's not even happening on a timely basis because we're administering so many tests. It's so much burdensome on the data entry that when I called today to check on some things, I said, hey, is this a positive test? Is this even in the system? Not there. That doesn't mean it's not coming. It just means it's not there, and it's been more than 24 hours. So Trumbull County, Ohio, a lot of the counties, that is becoming commonplace because they don't have the manpower to do it. So schools are taking up more responsibility in the contact tracing. All the more the reason to stay on a hybrid plan and then try to react adeptly when we need to, I believe, if something happens that warrants going remote. So I'm not saying we won't go remote at some point, but when I consulted with our principals recently to kind of get a vibe on what are you seeing, what is your sense, what is your recommendation, the general sense is our operations are being effective, and we are producing with results in that regard. So naturally these numbers could change that if we get something of a mini outbreak, if you will, like we did at Bascom, and we have to react accordingly. And I would say this, that's the beauty of being able to adjust quickly. Because when we started back in August, we kind of told our families, well, we'll give you kind of advance notice if we have to go to remote. We couldn't give advance notice. We had to go to remote. We had to go right now. And families did great. Our teachers did great. And, we are doing a better job with that remote than we did in the spring because, we got teachers that are logging on, doing their Google Meets at scheduled times, and they're conducting these virtual classroom sessions. So we've had improvement in that area. We've responded appropriately, and we were able to do it quickly, a lot quicker than what we thought we could do it even back in August. So we're prepared to respond accordingly as the data warrants it. So any final thoughts, comments, questions? Mr. Morton, anything to offer on that front?
No, sir.
Okay. All right.
Move into the regular agenda items.
Okay.
Turn it back over to you, Mr. Coleman.
Sure. Let me pull up the agenda. Before we do that, I want to check. Yeah, there have been no new messages, so that will end the public participation part, and we'll go right to the meeting agenda. The first item on the agenda is a recommendation of board to approve the minutes of our regular meeting on October 12th, 2020, and then the work session minutes from November 4th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ansell, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ansell?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mr. Sold.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the October financial report as presented by the treasurer.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Ansel. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the LaBrae Board of Education accept the 5-year forecast for fiscal year 2021 as presented by the treasurer.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ansel, second by Mr. Morton. Any discussion? Can we appreciate Brad's work on that and the work session we had this morning?
Yeah, and, you know, for the public, I don't know if we'll put it on our website, but it should be on ODE within 2 to 3 weeks.
Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a recommendation for the Board of Education to approve the following resolution endorsing the Fair School Funding Plan. Now, I am not going to read this resolution in its entirety, but I will say that a copy is available for anybody who wants it. All you have to do is call the office, the central office, the Board of Education offices, and we can surely provide that to you. But generally, the resolution is going to cite a number of issues relative to the Supreme Court case, relative to school funding and the current formula and how many districts are either capped or on the guarantee. It's going to cite the fact that due to the pandemic, there's a lot of freezing of the foundation payments, and there's really no formula operation, so all schools in essence are on the guarantee. And then it's going to cite the fact that the Robert Cupp and John Patterson work group have convened and done the research, and the work group has developed a funding framework for schools. And then eventually we're going to get to the point where it'll read, and now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education of the LaBrae Local School District that it is necessary to formally endorse the Fair School Funding Plan as introduced in Senate Bill 376 of the 133rd General Assembly, the Senate Companion Bill to substitute House Bill 305, to ensure that K-12 schools in Ohio are funded using a rational school funding system that meets the needs of all Ohio students in the 21st century. And also resolve that the treasurer is authorized to deliver or cause to be delivered a certified copy of this resolution to community leaders, to the members of the Ohio House of Representatives, and to the Ohio Senate, including Representative Mike O'Brien and Senator Sean O'Brien, and to the office of Governor Michael DeWine, and then that upon passage, this resolution shall be in full force and effect immediately.
Motion.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mrs. Ansel. Any discussion? I'd just like to state, I think for our district especially, in disadvantage, we have like 60-something% free and reduced lunch. I think this kind of helps us guide our community at this time. It's something we really need. We can't go with the old way. So hoping something gets resolved with this. This is just going to let our representatives know how we feel. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the LaBrae Board of Education accept the resignation letter for retirement purposes of Carol Sturgeon with the last date of employment being May 28, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion? Just want to say we appreciate her. I think she's got 20 years in, so we appreciate her time with us. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignation letter for retirement purposes of John D. Zelenak with the last date of employment of June 30th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Morton, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion? We appreciate Mr. Zelnak's 31 years of education, and you've been a teacher and a coach, kind of stepped in where we needed, so we do appreciate it. Wish you well. Treasurer, please call a roll.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ansel?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding with the LaBrae Teachers Association regarding the virtual learning program.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Ansel. Any discussion?
Has this been in effect since the beginning of the school year? Or are we just starting this up?
Oh, no, this is what's been in effect since like the second week of September when that virtual curriculum, when we were able to get our kids enrolled.
That's
Right.
what I thought. Why are we just giving the memorandum with them now?
Because we did not have that memorandum finalized prior to the October meeting. That wasn't in place to approve, so we were still working through some of those issues, and now we're bringing it to you for ratification.
Okay, there was also mentioned in there that there's going to be a review of it at the end of the 9 weeks. Is that done?
We did. That was we held that meeting. I did a Zoom session with our teachers and our principals in the evening, and we had discussed some things in terms of, how the program was working, what were they seeing from students, how were teachers managing the program, some of those issues. So, for example, one of the issues was regarding written work and grading. And so we were trying to look at getting answers on the program on how to facilitate making that easier when teachers can require the written component to an assessment versus not requiring the written component to the assessment. One of the things that our teachers found is that some of them were not familiar with how that worked, and there was an inordinate amount of time being spent on grading those assessments to the rubric, and then we had to try to track down some resources. So we had some good conversations in those meetings about things like that to kind of assess what our students and teachers were experiencing. And of course, that's, that program, the Fuel Ed program, hasn't been, without its growing pains for sure. Our parents know that firsthand. But these were all ongoing conversations. And then we're going to come back to that, sometime here in December and have another follow-up to see what some issues are. So weekly, just since you brought that up, Mr. Morton, I appreciate you jogging my memory. We also share notifications I get weekly of spreadsheets for student progress. And I push those out to our principals so our principals can see the progress on that virtual work. And so our principals then are tracking down with the counselors, trying to identify students that we maybe have to engage more effectively with our counselors and teachers. The other thing that we just did here about a week ago on that virtual learning front is we pushed out an intent to return. So that's something that, we had parents giving us feedback on that. So I digress a little bit, but just it made me think of it, and I wanted to share that with the board.
Is there anything that's written up on how they're supposed to approach this is different than what they normally do in the class and since it's virtual? Guidelines, I'm guessing.
Well, we don't have anything formalized in terms of guidelines. I mean, we've had conversations and we've emailed collectively about how to manage it, because primarily the idea is we wanted to make LaBrae teachers, so that we can connect with our own kids, the managers, facilitators of those programs. It did require, we told our teachers that it did require some grading, but the feedback we were getting, for example, was that it's not a lot, time-consuming grading, because the computer grades most of it. And that was one of the problems that we found with the written work, is some of our teachers were saying, we're spending a lot of time doing grading. I thought they said we weren't going to have to do a ton of grading. So we tried to find a way to balance that. That was that part of the conversation. We talked about communication and emails, that you can expect to be communicating via email with parents and students, and a lot of our teachers have done that, and they try to monitor their individual classroom progress. So for those that are taking this on as an extra duty, it's looked differently than the one teacher who's doing it as her regular day-to-day job, because the one teacher that's doing it as a regular day-to-day job, Mrs. Tomazis, is doing K-12 English for every kid in the district who's virtual. So her job looks a little bit differently, and she's extensively finding resources on how to write essays and materials that are age appropriate, and she'll post those and share those exemplars with students in those grade levels or with parents. And Mrs. Tomazis has been a great resource at being kind of a conduit with Fuel Ed to questions, and when she gets answers or guidance, she shares it out among the group. So it's kind of been a fluid situation. To be honest with you, I don't know that we could have put together specific guidelines. We've been kind of learning as we go.
And so she is the only one out of like 14 people here that are involved with it? That this full-time list are added duties to what the regular...
Yeah, you know what, on that list, we are going to strike her from that list because she doesn't qualify to be covered by that MOU, all right? But all of the other people are doing it as an extra duty, okay? If some of those teachers who do it as an extra duty and they're expected to take their free time to grade what might be graded or email students or email parents, if, for example, we have a high school teacher that has an extra period, because when we set the high school schedule, we weren't going to have a period for 2 kids or 1 kid. And so I know that there was an elimination of a high school course, and that high school teacher now had an extra period. So in our MOU, we wrote in provisions that if you have extra duties, you're not getting paid for that. You're not getting paid for that extra period. We're just going to consider that a duty or assignment, which is real common in education. You get a duty assignment, like a lunch duty. Well, now you've got a virtual learning duty. And we're going to cap it so that the first, I don't know what we put in there, I think it was 15 students. So the first 15 students, that's your extra duty. Beyond that, now you could qualify for the MOU. So we tried to identify those types of teachers. There was a second high school teacher that originally was going to have an extra duty or a free period, and we were going to make that a duty for that individual as well. But within the last week, right before school, we ended up scheduling a class, and that teacher didn't have any extra duties. So outside of those 2 scenarios, this is all extra work for our teachers beyond their regular day.
Okay, I was just concerned that maybe they were taking time away from the students that are here to address those things, but they're not.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that they have not expressed their concerns. They have. And, that was definitely part of the conversation, not necessarily directly stated, but definitely implied based on the conversation in terms of how much time it was taking. So I think one could logically conclude that if it was taking an inordinate amount of time, in their evening hours, and let's face it, a lot of teachers do a lot of work to prep for class in the evening hours, then you can conclude that it might be taking away from our in-person attendance as well. So that's where we had to go back and try to find some greater clarity on the answers. Like when I dug in a little bit deeper, I talked to some K-5 teachers who said, I'm not doing any grading at that level because the computer was doing it all. But where there was more written assignments, as you climbed the grade level, it was more age appropriate, there was more written work. And we then provided teachers with instructions on, you can exempt those completely from a student, and then where appropriate, where you see a standard is really important and you want a kid to write on that, well then by all means assign that particular one. And here's why that's important. One of the things we learned in our middle school, this program is not teaching Ohio science standards. It's teaching national science standards. Now there's a lot of crossover, and I've had some conversation with a couple of middle school parents back in early October about that. Look, don't worry about the Ohio Achievement Test in middle school. We know there's going to be learning gaps at every grade level. We're going to have to work to overcome them. So it's kind of hard to say that a kid should take every written assessment at those grade levels when that might not even really be a specific Ohio standard. So if I'm a teacher, I may say, you know what, that's not really in our standards. I'm going to block that one off and no kid's going to do it. But this one over here in the next unit, I want to make sure that every kid writes a 10-sentence paragraph on that topic. So we were able to hopefully give them clarity on how to do that. And subsequently then, free up a little more time and make the thing a little bit more manageable. And one step further, when we have that intent to return, I think we have 30 kids right now planning on coming back at the semester. And we have 180 roughly on virtual learning with 30 returning. You're going to see, that number will go up a little bit. We had some responses yesterday submitted. I think I told parents in the email that we sent out, I had them tell the deadline was a Sunday, I think it's the 6th. I have to check my calendar. So they got a couple more weeks, and then we want to start looking at, okay, how do we integrate these kids back and get them a schedule? It's going to be a lot easier to do that at the elementary level than it's going to be to build schedules at the high school, middle school, but it can be done. So, and when we reduce that burden, that is going to change, the workload, the management load of our teachers as well.
Were the folks that were going to be having this other, were they volunteers or did we actively seek them out?
We asked for volunteers, who's interested, and then we had them attend an informational session on Zoom with the ESC. And so then it was either, okay, we're going forward with this, are you in or you out? Because we had to know who was committed, and they've all voluntarily committed to moving forward with it.
Anything else? All right, treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mrs. Ansel,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Sole.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the LaBrae Board of Education hire the following virtual learning instructors according to the terms and conditions of the virtual learning MOU. And we're going to list all of those individuals: Lisa Aldridge, Adrian Candiotti, Stephen DeMuzio, Lauren Ekman, Kelly Huscroft, Chad Kaiser, Jonathan McNeamer, Heather Sabo, Veronica Sarich. We'll scratch Ms. Damazis, Christine Wevers, John Wolford, Melanie Wolke, and Laura Zigmont. Actually, we'll scratch Laura Zigmont as well.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ansel, second by Mr. Gibson. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ansel,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Abstain.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Sole.
Yes, motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve Melanie DeBoard for home instruction services at a rate of $20 per hour, effective October 26, 2020.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mrs. Ansel,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Sole.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve Anthony J. Calderon as an Ohio Department of Education credentialed principal evaluator, valid through October 20th, 2022.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mrs. Ansel, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion?
Credentials were set to expire here in the middle of November, so I worked to renew those based on Ohio Department software program, and you have a copy of the certificate in your packet.
Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ansel,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Sole.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the following individual as a classified substitute for the remainder of the 2020-21 school year, and that's Andrea Dobrin, substitute secretary and cook, effective November 6, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mr. Morton. Any discussion? Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mrs. Ansel,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Sole.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation the Board of Education approve the first reading of the following board policy revision, and that is policy 6114, and that's the cost principles spending federal funds.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gibson, second by Mrs. Ansel. Any discussion?
You might recall back in late spring, early summer, we had shared with you the idea that the federal funds, we were going through a cafeteria audit, and in the review, they inquired about this policy, and the idea, I think it was called a Buy American clause, if you will. And Mrs. Jones, before her retirement, had asked me to talk to Neola to see if they had a policy in the works, because it wasn't in our policy. And so I did ask in August, our policy rep, I believe it was August, early September, when we met with Mrs. Roby, if Neola had something like that. I shared with her the comments from the cafeteria review, and she let me know that Neola was getting that request from a number of their clients. They were working on it, and they just rolled that out. Simultaneously, they also rolled out a revision to procurement, which was 6325, and we made some of those minor edits. Since we were already in the process with the first reading, we made those additional edits, and we're bringing that to you in the second reading. So this is for a new policy. It's a Buy American clause. When you spend federal funds, there are certain requirements we've got to meet, and it's now written into this draft policy.
Treasurer, please call the roll.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansell,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Sewell.
Yes, motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the second reading and subsequent adoption of the following board bylaw and policy additions, revisions, and rescissions. So you'll see a number of new policies. The biggest one there is 2266. That's a new federal policy on non-discrimination on the basis of sex in district programs or activities. And then the other ones are minor revisions. 2266 is a completely new policy. And then, we'll eventually, what we're going to work on is getting that policy posted, a link to our website, because by federal law, you've got to be able to have easy access to that. We've got to be able to also post on our website our compliance coordinators, who they are, how to contact them, and then a reporting form as well. So once you pass this, we're going to be getting our website into compliance with this particular policy in general. The rest are pretty standard revisions based on, state changes to law. And because of 2266, we no longer need 551702. That's why that policy is being rescinded.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mrs. Ansell, second by Mrs. Duncan. Any discussion?
Just gonna ask you, I had trouble finding these certificates. Where's it at? Stumbled on them somehow, I don't even know where I found it. Can you tell me where I would find these in our?
Yeah, they in the main shared folder. Why I don't put them in the board meeting folder is because I would have put these in October, and so I thought, okay, one central location, board policies, Neola, it's right on the main folder. So when you go to our shared drive, right from the get-go, before you go anywhere else, you'll see all those folders listed. Look for the one that says board policies, Neola.
That's where I thought
Yeah.
I did originally, and
Yeah, I believe, let me get the wording specifically. It's the fourth folder down. It says board policies, Neola. And when you open that folder, you'll see a list of all the other folders. And when I put them in there, then I always try to, this might be a misleading part. These would have been in the August 2021. Because they only do 2 updates a year. They do them in like August and January. And so when they give us the fall update, it's in August, and that's labeled volume 39, number 1, and in parentheses I put August 2020. And next year I'll put, when we get them, and we might not get them till February when they're finalized, I'll put, it'll probably be by that time, volume 39, number 2, and it'll say January 2021. So I think keeping them in a central location works best, unless you guys collectively tell me you want them a different way, just let me know.
I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Just and I just started going through the other folders one by one, and first one I found back is where I found it. So it wasn't really
Yeah. Here's the other thing I would recommend, because I've done that and I'm the one that manages it. So, when you are in the shared drive, whenever in doubt, just go to the top where it says search and drive and type in Neola, it should populate, hopefully.
I typed in policy and I got
Yeah,
some of them.
okay,
Yeah, I think we did a little more. I did that before.
yeah.
Okay. Roll call. Roll call.
Mrs. Ansell?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Anybody have anything under miscellaneous?
Yeah.
Doing fine?
No, that's all on the same one.
Yeah.
That's all in the same policy.
Yeah, that was all the same one. Okay, we'll go to concerns of the board. Mr. Gibson, do you have anything you want to add?
Just want to compliment our students and our staff on keeping the COVID from spreading as it has in some other districts. And it's a testament to the people, the students and the staff here and the administrators, I think. So far, knock on wood, that haven't had just a terrible time. We haven't had to change our schedules radically, except for the past couple weeks. So, my congratulations to them on that. Doing good work, tough situation.
Mr. Morton?
I agree, we should get some complete. Doing fine, we want to keep working as long as we can, keep a good fellow in there.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes, I agree with these two gentlemen. It's, we need to hang in there and continue in the direction we're going. Hopefully, we'll do very well.
Mrs. Ansell?
Yeah, I agree as well, and I hope our community has a stay safe and stay healthy for the Thanksgiving holiday.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we've been pretty fortunate that the staff, students have been following the protocols. We want to keep it up. I know flu season is coming, so we just do our best to try to stay with it. We do have one more item. We need to go to executive session to discuss employment of personnel. Need a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mrs. Duncan, second by Mrs. Ansell. All in favor? Aye. We will not be taking any votes. We will come out, back out in the open session to adjourn the meeting. So I don't imagine we're going to stay live.
No.
So we'll go to executive session at 7:20. Take a break for it.
Okay, so this ends the live portion of the LaBrae Board of Education meeting. LaBrae will enter into executive session, and there will be no votes other than a vote to adjourn when they come out of executive session.